Richard Thornton lifted his finger and pointed straight at the 10-year-old boy. "Open the safe," he said calmly, "or your black mother is fired right now." A sharp breath cut through the room. The maid stepped forward, her voice shaking. "Mr. Thornton, please. He's just a child." "Shut your mouth, Lorraine." Thornton didn't even look at her. "I don't take orders from the help," he added, swirling champagne in his glass. "Especially not from your kind." The room erupted in laughter, 50 billionaires, 50 phones recording. 50 smiles sharpened by cruelty. Thornton raised his glass higher. $200 million sits inside that safe. Every locksmith in America failed. But sure, let's see what a little black maid's son can do. More laughter, louder now. Meaner. 5 minutes, boy, Thornton said. "If you can even count that high." Lorraine's knees buckled. "Sir, I'm begging you." "Beg quieter," Thornton replied. "You're embarrassing yourself." The boy said nothing. He walked toward the massive steel safe, placed his small hand against the cold metal, and smiled. But this didn't begin here. So, let's rewind. 30 minutes earlier. Before the bet, before the humiliation, before everything changed forever. The service hallway smelled like industrial cleaner and stale champagne. The kind of smell that never quite leaves your clothes. Janssen C. Foster sat on an overturned storage crate, his feet dangling 6 inches above the floor. A library book rested open in his lap, Mechanical Engineering Fundamentals. The pages were worn thin by dozens of readers before him. Dog-eared corners marked chapters on gear ratios and tumbler mechanisms. Coffee stains decorated Chapter 7. He'd renewed this book 4 times. The librarian had stopped asking questions weeks ago. Janssen was 10 years old, small for his age, invisible by design. Through a cracked service door, he could see the gala in full-motion crystal chandeliers scattered light across Italian marble floors. Women drifted past in gowns that cost more than his mother earned in a year. Men laughed too loudly, wrists flashing watches worth more than the apartment building, where Janssen slept on a pull-out couch. This was Richard Thornton's world, a world of excess, a world of entitlement, a world where people like Janssen existed only to serve, to clean, to disappear. Janssen had learned how to watch without being seen. It was survival. The first rule his mother ever taught him. Don't draw attention, don't make noise. Don't exist louder than necessary. His mother, Lorraine Foster, had worked for Richard Thornton for 12 years. Long before Janssen was born, she scrubbed marble floors on her hands and knees, pressed Egyptian cotton shirts until they felt like paper, organized closets by color, by season, by designer. She smiled through insults because smiles paid rent. Lorraine was 45. Her hands were rough from chemicals. Her back ached from years of bending and lifting. But her eyes still carried something fierce. Something she hid from employers and saved only for her son. That night, she had no childcare. The regular sitter canceled. The backup was sick. So Janssen waited in the hallway with his library book, making himself as small as possible. The penthouse was a monument to ego. Original Picassos lined the walls that could have housed 10 families. A jeweled Fabergé egg sat under glass, worth more than Janssen's entire neighborhood. Awards crowded every surface, philanthropy trophies from organizations designed mostly to celebrate men like Thornton. But tonight's centerpiece was different. A safe, not just any safe. A 1943 Luftwaffe field safe, supposedly pulled from a Nazi officer's bunker in Bavaria. Inside, artwork valued at $200 million. Thornton didn't care about what was inside. He cared about the story professional locksmiths had tried for months. All failed. Thornton turned their failure into entertainment. "Crack the safe," he told his guests, "and keep whatever's inside." $200 million sitting in his living room like a party trick. Janssen stared at the safe through the doorway. His heartbeat quickened. He recognized it. Not from being here, from research, endless YouTube videos, obscure online forums. A German engineering archive his teacher, Mrs. Collins, helped him translate word by word. He knew this model's weakness. The 1943 Luftwaffe safe had an acoustic flaw. The tumblers resonated at precise frequencies when aligned correctly. You didn't guess the combination, you listened. You felt the vibrations through your fingertips. You let the metal speak. But knowing something wasn't the same as being allowed to know it. And Janssen had learned that boys who looked like him weren't supposed to understand things. Men like Thornton couldn't. Janssen see. His mother's voice pulled him back. Lorraine stood in the doorway, uniform crisp, exhaustion heavy in her eyes. "Baby, you need to stay hidden," she whispered. "I mean it. I know, Mama. Don't let anyone see you. Don't talk to anyone." She knelt and straightened his second-hand collar with practiced hands. "We need this job," she said quietly. You understand? Yancy wanted to tell her she deserved better, that no job was worth being looked through like furniture, that one day things would change, but some truths cost too much to say out loud. I'll be quiet, he said. Lorraine kissed his forehead. That's my good boy. She returned to the party, carrying a silver tray of champagne flutes. Wearing her smile like invisible armor, Yancy went back to his book, but his eyes kept drifting to the safe. Then it happened. A drunk guest stumbled backward, laughing too hard at his own joke. His elbow slammed into Yancy's shoulder. A wine glass tipped. Red liquid splashed across Yancy's shirt like a wound. What the hell? The man barked. He looked down. Yancy looked up. There's a kid back here. Heads turned. Conversation stopped. Silence spread across the room. The invisible boy was suddenly painfully visible. Richard Thornton noticed. He crossed the room slowly, deliberately, each step designed to dominate. The crowd parted for him like water around a shark. His eyes swept over Yancy. The stained shirt, the worn shoes, the holes near the toes. The library book clutched tight like a shield. And that was the moment everything began to change. Well, well, Thornton's voice echoed across the marble, designed to be heard. Looks like the staff brought a pet tonight. Uneasy laughter rippled through the room. Lorraine appeared instantly, her face drained of color. Mr. Thornton, I'm so sorry. My sitter canceled last minute, and I thought. You thought. Thornton arched an eyebrow. I don't pay you to think. I pay you to clean. More laughter followed, louder now, crueler. I'll take him home right now, Lorraine said quickly. I'll call a cab, please. You'll stay. Thornton raised a hand, silencing her without looking away from the boy. Actually, he said slowly, smiling, this might be entertaining. The room shifted. Guests leaned in. Phones were raised. People sensed spectacle coming. Thornton's smile was the smile of a man who had never been told no in 62 years. The nightmare began. 50 phones hovered in the air, recording. Thornton adjusted his own phone carefully, finding the perfect angle. This wasn't just humiliation. This was content. Something to share later in his private circle. The one where powerful men laughed at people who couldn't fight back. All right, kid, Thornton said, glancing at his diamond-studded watch. 5 minutes. Let's see what the maid's son knows about safes. Yancy didn't respond. He leaned in, pressing his ear against the steel. The metal was cold against his cheek. He closed his eyes. His fingers found the dial. They began to turn, slowly, precisely, not guessing, listening. Inside that safe, the tumblers spoke. Each one carried a faint vibration when it aligned correctly, like notes forming a chord. The safe wasn't resisting him. It was answering him. There's no way, someone muttered. Thornton laughed. America's best couldn't crack it, and you think a kid. Click. Thornton's sentence faltered. Yancy's hands moved faster now, more confident. The vibrations grew clearer. The room fell silent. Even the champagne fizz seemed to pause. What is he doing? A woman whispered. Click. Thornton lowered his phone slightly. Something unfamiliar crept into his expression. Doubt. Number. That's impossible. Clunk. The massive steel door swung open. 28 seconds. The safe that defeated every professional locksmith in America opened before Thornton could finish denying it. Silence. One heartbeat. 2. Then chaos. A woman screamed. Glass shattered on marble. Guests surged forward, phones blazing. Lorraine's legs gave out completely. A waiter caught her just in time. Inside the safe, no artwork. Only paper. Stacks of documents. Leather, bound ledgers, photographs, bank records, wire transfers. Evidence layered on evidence. Thornton lunged forward. Don't touch that. That's private. Too late. It was already recorded. Yancy stepped back, calm and composed, like he'd just opened a school locker. He looked at Thornton. You said 1 million, he said quietly. Thornton froze. For my mom, Yancy continued. You said it out loud. Everyone heard you. A single photograph slid across the floor and stopped at Lorraine's feet. She picked it up with shaking hands. Her own name stared back at her, next to a number that could have changed her life, next to the word transferred. How did a 10-year-old do this? The answer began years earlier, 6 years earlier, in a cramped one-bedroom apartment in Queens. Lorraine's alarm clock died one cold February morning. Panic surged through her. She couldn't afford a replacement. She couldn't afford to be late. One more warning, and she'd lose her job. So she planned to wake herself every hour, terrified of oversleeping. The next day, Yancy found the broken clock in the trash. He sat on the kitchen floor for 3 hours with a butter knife and a bent paperclip. At noon, he walked into the kitchen holding the clock. It's fixed, Mama. It was ticking perfectly. How did you do that? Lorraine whispered. Yancy shrugged. It wanted to work. It just forgot how. That night, Lorraine cried. Not from sadness, but from fear. Because she realized her son was extraordinary, and the world was not kind to extraordinary boys who looked like him. At 6, Yancey brought home a rusted padlock from behind their building. 2 days later, he opened it with a paperclip and a bobby pin. At 8, he discovered online lock communities forums, manuals, histories of security stretching back to ancient Rome. He learned words his teachers couldn't explain: false gate, binding order, acoustic resonance. Mrs. Collins noticed. She was 50, a former mechanical engineer who had left corporate life behind. And when she saw what Yancey could do, she didn't dismiss it. She nurtured it. Because sometimes genius doesn't announce itself loudly. Sometimes it waits quietly, until the world makes the mistake of daring it to speak. Mrs. Collins had found a second life in teaching. After decades in engineering, she'd learned to recognize brilliance where others saw inconvenience. And she saw it in Yancey during the very first week of 3rd grade. "What are you reading during lunch?" she asked one afternoon. "German engineering archives," Yancey replied calmly. "About World War II safes." She stared at the 8-year-old boy holding documents that had once challenged her in graduate school, reading them not because he had to, but because he wanted to. "Would you like help translating the technical sections?" she asked. That single question changed everything. Mrs. Collins became his quiet mentor. She shared textbooks from her private collection, university journals, access to research databases through credentials that had never been fully deactivated. She called him my little locksmith, and meant it as the highest praise she could give. "You have a gift, Yancey," she told him one afternoon, after he solved a puzzle that had taken her an hour. "A rare one. Don't let anyone convince you, it isn't yours to use." At 9 years old, Yancey saw the news on a borrowed tablet at the public library. A Manhattan billionaire, Richard Thornton, had purchased a legendary Nazi-era safe at auction, $200 million in rumored contents. Every professional locksmith had failed. The camera zoomed in a 1943 Luftwaffe field safe. Yancey's heart stopped. He knew it. He'd studied that exact mechanism for months. The acoustic weakness, the resonance frequency, the listening technique required to align the tumblers. He ran home so fast he forgot his library card. "Mama," he said breathlessly that night, "I could open that safe, the one on television. I know how." Lorraine looked up from the bills she was sorting, deciding which ones could wait and which couldn't. "That's Mr. Thornton's safe," she said gently. "The man I work for." "I know," Yancey said. "But don't get ideas," she interrupted softly, ruffling his hair. "Focus on school. That safe isn't our business." Yancey nodded. He obeyed, but he didn't stop learning. 3 months before the gala, Mrs. Collins helped him locate the original blueprints, buried deep in a German university archive, full schematics of the 1943 model, every flaw, every vulnerability. Yancey treated them like sacred text. He practiced on old safes from pawn shops, vintage locks from estate sales where no one noticed a quiet boy browsing alone. His times improved 32 seconds, then 28, then 21. He didn't know if he'd ever touch the real thing, but if the moment came, he would be ready. Back in the penthouse, chaos ruled. Documents scattered across marble floors like leaves in a storm. Security guards tried to gather them, but phones were already flashing. Evidence slipped through fingers faster than it could be contained. Yancey stood still, watching the damage unfold. He hadn't known what was inside the safe. He only wanted to save his mother's job, to prove that being unseen didn't mean being unworthy. Now, a woman in diamonds stared at a document in her hand, face drained of color. "Richard," she whispered, "this is my pension fund." Her voice cracked. "These transfers, I never approved them." Another man stepped forward, shaking. "The Children's Hospital Foundation," he said. "We built that together. The account is empty." Voices rose. "My retirement. The charity proceeds. 20 years of savings." Yancey looked at the papers carpeting the floor. He didn't understand every number, but he understood enough. Years of theft, hidden behind a safe no one was supposed to open. Lorraine lowered herself to the floor, not collapsing, but choosing to kneel. One page had landed near her feet. Her name, her employee account, 12 years of retirement contributions. Gone. "Mom," Yancey whispered. Lorraine looked at her son with something he'd never seen before. Not fear rage. 12 years, she said quietly. "I worked for him 12 years. Phones were confiscated, guests refused. Lawyers were called, police were called, newsrooms lit up. In the middle of it all, a woman crouched beside Yancey. She was sharp, eyed calm, her phone already recording. "Do you understand what you just did?" she asked. I opened a safe, Yancy replied. She gave a grim smile. You opened Pandora's box. She extended her hand. Diana Shaw, investigative journalist. I've been chasing Richard Thornton for 5 years. She glanced around the room. Tonight, you gave me everything I needed. Thornton stormed toward them. No confidence left. Only desperation. You, he snapped at Lorraine. Control your son. Lorraine stood slowly, holding the page with her stolen savings. Control him, she said evenly. You stole from us. That's a lie, Thornton barked. Forgeries. I'm holding the proof, Lorraine said, lifting the page. My name, my money, your signature. Thornton stepped closer, looming. You think anyone's going to believe you? He sneered. Yancy stepped forward. 10 years old, small, unshaking. You made a bet, he said quietly. $1 million, 50 witnesses, 50 cameras. Thornton's jaw clenched. That was a joke. You weren't laughing when the safe opened. The room froze. Pay my mom, Yancy said. And for the first time in his life, Richard Thornton had no answer. The room had stopped breathing. Phones were raised. Eyes were locked. Every person present sensed the moment tipping towards something irreversible. Richard Thornton had no clean move left. The bet had been made publicly, on camera, in front of witnesses who mattered to him. Backing out now meant admitting that a 10-year-old black boy from Queens had beaten him. Openly, unmistakably, and forever. His jaw tightened. Then he smiled. Not warmth, not humor. The cold reptilian smile of a man who believed power could still save him. You want to play games? He said smoothly, straightening his jacket. Let me show you how adults play. He turned to his lawyer and whispered. The counterattack began. Peyton, Thornton's personal attorney, stepped forward. 60 years old, perfect suit, perfect posture, a voice trained to erase inconvenient truths. Ladies and gentlemen, Peyton said calmly, raising his hands. Let's all take a breath. The room obeyed, instinctively. What we witnessed tonight is unusual, he continued. Impressive, perhaps. But let's be clear about a few legal realities. One finger rose. First, Mr. Thornton's so-called. That was obviously a joke, party entertainment, not a binding agreement. Uneasy murmurs spread. A second finger. Second, this child accessed private property without authorization. That is trespassing. Possibly burglary. Lorraine stiffened. A third finger. And finally, any documents photographed or removed tonight are stolen property. Mr. Thornton will pursue maximum damages against everyone involved. Phones lowered, fear rippled through the room. Thornton stepped forward again, confidence returning like poison filling a vein. And now, he said casually, about your employment, Lorraine. He scrolled on his phone. Interesting thing about your visa, there's a paperwork issue, old, never resolved. Lorraine's face drained of color. One call to immigration, Thornton said softly, and you're deported. Your son goes into foster care. A pause. Separated, of course. The silence became unbearable. So here's my offer, Thornton continued, clasping his hands like a benevolent king. The boy apologizes. Publicly, admits this was staged. Everyone deletes their footage. He smiled. And I'll let your mother keep her visa. Her job, her little life. Lorraine dropped to her knees in front of her son. Please, she whispered, gripping his shoulders. Just apologize. We'll survive. We always do. Tears streamed down her face. I can't lose you. Yancy looked past her. At Ruth, the cook. At Samuel, the driver. At Martha, the housekeeper. At tired faces that had lived invisible for decades. People whose names were in those documents. People who had been robbed quietly, systematically, without ever being asked. Then he looked back at Thornton, at the certainty in his eyes. No, Yancy said. Lorraine's grip tightened. Baby, he stole from you, Yancy said steadily. From all of them. He stepped forward. You're scared, he told Thornton calmly. The smirk faltered. If those documents were fake, you'd want the police, but you don't, because you know what's in them, Thornton snapped. Watch your mouth. You're a bully, Yancy said, his voice carrying. Bullies are only powerful until someone stands up. Movement stirred behind him. Ruth stepped forward. Then Samuel, then Martha. One by one, the invisible formed a line. Sure are years, Ruth said, voice trembling but firm. You stole from me for 12 years. She straightened. I'm done. Sirens wailed outside. News alerts exploded across phones. The hashtag Faye Thornton Exposed went live before the elevators even opened. By the time Thornton's crisis team arrived, it was already over. But the most important moment wasn't public. It happened in a narrow service hallway. Lorraine grabbed Yancy's shoulders, eyes wide with awe. What did you do? She whispered. Yancy looked up at her. I opened a safe, Mama, and nothing would ever be the same again. He was going to fire you. Yancey's voice cracked for the first time that night. The words rushed out, heavy and raw. He called you worthless. He called you a toilet cleaner. He said you're kind. Lorraine's breath caught sharply in her throat. I couldn't just stand there, Mama, Yancey said, tears finally spilling down his cheeks. I couldn't watch him hurt you and do nothing. I couldn't. She pulled him into her arms, holding him so tightly she could feel his heart pounding against her chest. 12 years, she whispered into his hair. 12 years. I bowed my head in that house, apologized for breathing, told myself it was survival, told myself it was for you. She pulled back and looked at him, really looked at him. When did you get so brave? Yancey wiped his face with the back of his hand. You taught me. Lorraine shook her head weakly. I never taught you to do this. You taught me that doing the right thing is hard, he said, his voice steadying. But it's always right. You said it every day, even when you thought I wasn't listening. She laughed through her tears. A broken, beautiful sound. I did say that, she whispered. Every single day. Then something changed in her. Her shoulders straightened. Her spine lifted. The years of shrinking fell away. Come on, baby, she said, taking his hand. We're not done yet. They walked back into the main room together, mother and son, hand in hand. Lorraine didn't look at the chaos, didn't look at the cameras, or lawyers, or panicked PR teams. She looked straight at Richard Thornton. My name is Lorraine Foster, she said. Her voice carried clear, steady, unafraid. I have cleaned this man's toilets for 12 years. Every conversation stopped. Diana's camera swung toward her. Phones followed. I smiled when he insulted me, apologized when he humiliated me in front of guests, said yes, sir, and thank you, sir, when he treated me like I was less than human. She stepped forward. Thornton stepped back. I did it because I thought I had no choice, because I thought being invisible was the only way to survive, because I thought I was protecting my son by teaching him to stay quiet, stay small. She turned to Yancey, tears falling freely now. But my son just reminded me of something I forgot. The room was utterly silent. He's 10 years old, she said, her voice breaking, then strengthening. And he's braver than I've been in 45 years of living. She faced Thornton again, eye to eye. You can threaten my visa. You can try to destroy my life. You can call me the help, or you're kind. She stepped closer. He retreated again. But you will never make me apologize for raising a son who knows right from wrong. Her voice filled the penthouse. That is something your money will never buy. Silence. One heartbeat. Two. Then someone clapped. One person. Then another. Then the entire room erupted. Applause thundered. Guests who had laughed were now wiping tears. Workers who had spent years invisible stood openly, crying, clapping. Finally seen, Richard Thornton stood alone in the center of his empire. His lawyer was gone. Security wouldn't meet his eyes. His crisis team was already resigning. The elevator chimed. The doors opened. 4 FBI agents stepped out. Richard Thornton, the lead agent said calmly. Thornton's face went white. You're under arrest for wire fraud, embezzlement, money laundering, and racketeering. The cuffs clicked shut. Do you know who I am? Thornton screamed as they led him away. Yes, the agent replied flatly. You're under arrest. As the elevator doors closed, Thornton twisted back toward Yancey. This isn't over, boy. Yancey met his gaze. For you, he said quietly. It is. The doors shut. The penthouse exploded in cheers. Lorraine held her son and wept. Within 24 hours, the world was on fire. Faye Thornton exposed became Faye Thornton arrested. Then Faye Justice Fourth invisible. Headlines screamed. 10-year. Old cracks, impossible safe. Exposes $340 million fraud. Maid's son brings down Manhattan billionaire. A modern David versus Goliath? The numbers were staggering. 850 victims. 15 years of theft. Pension funds drained. Charities robbed. Lives shattered. All hidden in a safe that was never supposed to be opened. Until a 10-year-old listened. Thornton's assets were frozen. Property seized. Art collections auctioned. Every stolen dollar tracked. Victims were paid back. Every cent. Ruth got the call on a quiet Wednesday afternoon. Your pension has been fully restored. Plus interest. Plus damages. She hung up, sat silently, then buried her face in the table and cried. Lorraine held her hand. No words needed. Yancey became famous against his will. Interviews, book deals, movie offers, all refused. He released one statement. I'm just a kid who likes puzzles. I didn't do this to be famous. I did it because betting my mom's job wasn't fair. My mom taught me to stand up when something isn't fair. That's it. Can I go back to school now? The world fell in love, and somewhere. A boy returned to his library book. Because the greatest locks aren't made of steel. They're made of silence. and once opened, they can never be closed again. Richard Thornton's empire collapsed faster than anyone imagined. Within days, the board of directors voted unanimously to remove him from his own company. The liability was too great, the damage too public, the risk too absolute. His wife of 12 years filed for divorce within the week, not out of rage, but self-preservation. 3 business partners resigned quietly. 2 others were placed under federal investigation. 1 turned state's witness, trading immunity for testimony that sealed Thornton's fate. The safe that was meant to glorify his power had become the weapon of his total destruction. While headlines chased Yancey's name, Lorraine's story traveled even farther. Immigration attorneys flooded her inbox with pro bono offers. Advocacy groups reached out. Media outlets requested interviews. Corporations offered high-paying jobs, transparent attempts to borrow her courage for their own image. She declined every single one. "I'm done working for people who only see my value when it benefits them," she told one reporter. "I spent 12 years being invisible. Now I want to help others be seen." Within weeks, Lorraine announced the creation of a support network for domestic workers, a hotline for reporting wage theft, a legal fund for immigration emergencies, an advocacy organization dedicated to the invisible workforce that kept America running. It was funded by a portion of the class action settlement she was owed. 1 week after the gala, a plain envelope arrived at their Queens apartment. No return address. Inside was a check, $1 million signed by Richard Thornton, dated the night of the gala, written before his arrest. He had honored the bet, only never planned to actually give it. Lorraine stared at the check for a long time. Then she endorsed it over to the victim's compensation fund, every dollar. "You could have kept it," Yancey said quietly. "He owed you." Lorraine smiled. "He did," she said. "But I don't need his money to know what I'm worth." She kissed her son's forehead. "You taught me that." 3 months later, life had changed completely, and somehow stayed exactly the same. Their new apartment in Brooklyn wasn't large. 2 modest bedrooms, a narrow kitchen, a bathroom so small you could touch both walls at once, a balcony barely wide enough for 2 folding chairs. But it was theirs, bought outright. No landlord, no lease, no one who could ever tell them to leave. Lorraine stood in the empty living room the day they got the keys, running her hand along the freshly painted wall like she needed to feel proof. "Mama?" Yancey asked, carrying in a box of books. "You okay?" "I'm good," she said, wiping her eyes. "Just processing." "Processing what?" "That no one can ever kick us out." She laughed softly. "This is ours." The Domestic Workers Support Network launched 2 weeks later from a tiny storefront office. 3 volunteers, 1 donated phone line. It rang non-stop. They helped 40 workers report wage theft in the first month, 63 the next, 81 the third. By month 4, they had expanded to 2 offices, 8 volunteers, and a full-time staff attorney funded by unsolicited donations. The work was exhausting, sometimes heartbreaking, but it was real, it mattered. Lorraine still cleaned houses, but only for clients she chose. People who paid fairly, people who said please and thank you, people who learned her name on day 1 for the first time. She worked on her own terms. Yancey's life changed too, though not always easily. School became complicated. Mrs. Collins instituted a strict no Thornton questions rule. Violators got extra homework. Repeat violators got calls home. It worked. Some kids treated Yancey like a hero, others with jealousy. Some watched him like he might expose their secrets too. He wanted none of it, so he started a club. Mechanical puzzles for beginners. Tuesdays and Thursdays, room 104. 5 kids showed up the first week, then 8, then 12, then 15. They took apart old clocks, studied gears, picked practice locks, learned that complex things were just simple systems working together. "Teaching," Mrs. Collins told him once, "is how you discover what you truly understand." Yancey's YouTube channel exploded quietly, over 200,000 subscribers. No face, no name, no mention of the safe, just knowledge. Every dollar of ad revenue went directly to his mother's network. Richard Thornton's trial moved forward relentlessly. Evidence was overwhelming, witnesses devastating, excuses collapsed. His penthouse sold at federal auction for $47 million. The buyer, a non-profit coalition for immigrant family housing. They announced plans to convert it into affordable apartments for domestic workers and their families. The marble floors where Lorraine once knelt would become homes. The irony was intentional. Ruth retired 3 weeks after receiving her restored pension, plus interest, plus damages, plus a written apology from the federal prosecutor. She framed it. She visited Lorraine every Sunday. Never thought I'd see the day, Ruth said once, sipping coffee on the tiny balcony. What day? The day I stopped being scared. Samuel opened a driving school in Queens, Second Chance Motors, helping immigrants navigate American roads and systems. Above his desk hung a photo of Thornton's penthouse being converted into housing. And Yancey. He finished his library book because some locks are made of steel, others are made of silence. And sometimes all it takes to change the world is a child brave enough to listen. Samuel personally drove the first family to their new home. He waited until they carried the last box inside before pulling away, hands resting on the steering wheel, quietly taking in what justice looked like when it finally arrived. Martha went back to school at 58, night classes, nursing program, homework at her kitchen table long after her shifts ended. Her first exam came back with an A+. Turns out, she told Lorraine over the phone, laughing through disbelief, 40 years of cleaning up after rich people teaches you a lot about anatomy and hygiene. 3 months after the gala, Lorraine and Yancey sat side by side on their small Brooklyn balcony. The city lights shimmered below them like scattered stars. The real stars were hidden by the glow, but the moon hung clear and steady above. That felt like enough. Lorraine broke the comfortable silence. Yancey, I need to tell you something I should have said weeks ago. He looked up from the miniature safe mechanism in his hands, built entirely from scrap metal. All those years at Thornton's house, she said quietly, staring at the calluses on her palms. I told myself I was being strong, surviving, protecting you. You were, Mama. She shook her head slowly. Number, I was scared. So scared of losing everything that I forgot I deserved anything. The silence between them felt safe now. You taught me something that night, she said, voice trembling. You didn't just open a safe. You taught me how to stand up straight again. Yancey's voice was soft. I learned it from watching you. Every day for 10 years. You just didn't know you were teaching me. She pulled him into a hug that said everything words couldn't later that night. Yancey handed her a small box. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet. Each charm was a tiny lock handmade from scrap metal, polished until it gleamed. What is this? Lorraine asked, tears thick in her voice. Every lock I opened before the safe, he said. All the ones nobody saw. Each one taught me something, and every time I practiced, I thought about you. Lorraine fastened the bracelet with trembling fingers. It's beautiful, she whispered. It's you. I think I want to be an engineer someday, Yancey added. Build things, not just open them. Lorraine smiled, fully freely, for the first time in longer than she could remember. Then that's exactly what you'll do. 1 year later, the verdict came. Richard Thornton stood in federal court as the words were read. Guilty. All counts. Wire fraud, embezzlement, money laundering, racketeering, tax evasion, witness tampering, 20. 8 years in federal prison, the same number of seconds it had taken a 10-year-old boy to end his empire. Cameras captured Thornton's hollow face as marshals led him away in handcuffs. A man who had finally learned, too late, that he was never untouchable. The headlines wrote themselves. The fall of Richard Thornton, the safe, the infamous Luftwaffe field safe, was donated to the Smithsonian. It sat behind glass in the American History Wing, accompanied by a brass plaque, opened by Yancey Foster. Age 10. School groups visited daily. Children pressed their ears to the glass, pretending they could hear the tumblers whispering secrets. Some stories become legends. This one had the advantage of being true. Ruth's granddaughter graduated as valedictorian. In her speech, she said, "A boy once taught my grandmother that it's never too late to speak up, and never too early to stand tall." Ruth cried openly in the front row. Samuel expanded Second Chance Motors to 3 locations. Over 500 new drivers earned licenses, jobs, independence. He personally drove 12 families to their new homes. Martha graduated at 59, top 5% of her class. On her first hospital shift, a wealthy patient snapped his fingers at her. She calmly set down his chart. "I spent 40 years cleaning up after people like you," she said. "I learned patience. I also learned I don't tolerate disrespect anymore. Now, would you like to start over?" He did. Lorraine's organization, Voices for the Invisible, expanded to 3 cities in its first year. Over 500 workers helped, wages recovered, visas protected, dignity restored. She wasn't famous. She was effective. That was enough. Mrs. Collins retired at the end of the school year. At her farewell, she raised a glass of cider. "I've taught hundreds of students," she said, "but only a few taught me something." Her eyes found Yancey in the crowd. The best teaching isn't giving answers. It's showing students they're allowed to ask questions, and then getting out of their way. Yancey was 11 now. At the regional science fair, he presented an app designed to protect domestic workers, documenting hours, conditions, and pay, encrypting evidence automatically. He didn't win first place. A volcano with real smoke effects did. But afterward, a woman handed him a card, MIT Engineering Outreach Program. "We've been watching your work," she said. "When you're ready, we'd love to talk." "I'm only 11, Yancey replied politely. "I've got time," she smiled. "I think you'll use it well." That night, Lorraine and Yancey sat at their kitchen table. Homework spread between them. Normal life. Extraordinary peace. Lorraine noticed a watch on his wrist, old, worn, familiar. "Where'd you get that?" "Thrift store, $3. It was broken." He smiled. "I fixed it." "Of course you did, Mom," he asked softly. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't opened that safe?" Lorraine thought for a long moment. "Sometimes," she admitted. "But then I remember. You didn't open it for money or fame. You opened it because someone threatened your mama." She took his hand. "And that means no matter what was inside that safe, you would have been exactly who you are." "Who's that, my son?" "The safe didn't make you special, baby. You already were. It just let the world finally see it." Richard Thornton believed power meant owning what others couldn't touch. He was wrong. The most valuable things aren't locked away. They live in patience, in quiet courage, in books read until the pages fall apart, in small hands brave enough to listen, and then act. Sometimes the smallest hands open the biggest doors.